Hello and welcome to Craft Sew with Gail T.C. Terry. I am glad that you've come back to take another look at my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. If you're like me and you like a hobo bag, this is the DIY project for you. It's the second in a three-part series of DIY gifts. What you'll need for this project, of course you'll need fabric. And if you have fabric or old jeans, you can upcycle, that's best. I have my peaking shears here, and they make a zigzag cut. Also a marking pen and a tape measure, or some type of measuring tool. My rotary cutter. Another pair of cutting shears, fabric cutting shears, and these are straight cutting shears. Also, you'll need some pins and a seam ripper just in case. If you're like me, I use my seam ripper a lot. Here, I'm going to use my cutting board and my cutting ruler as well. The fabric I have for the lining you see here is actually a pillow cover I got from the thrift store. I thought it was so pretty. I thought it would make a nice lining for this bag. I have two pair of old jeans. One's kind of a khaki duck canvas kind of fabric, and the other is denim. It's just a light colored denim fabric. So let's get started. You will love this bag. So you're going to cut your fabric into 4 strips. 18 by 6 is the standard size, and then once you make the pattern, you can make it larger or smaller, as you'll see at the end on the bags I've done. And you want to lay it out and pin right sides together. It just helps me to keep the lines that I'm sewing lined up. For some reason, it can get turned around if I move it away. So I lay it out, fold right sides together, and then just pin it. Or if you use the clips, you can clip that. And then I open it again to make sure that I have it where it will line up properly. And it will. And you're going to fold it over again and sew. You're going to do the same thing with your lining. You will sew it the same way, line it up. Even though it's not a contrasting fabric, you just put the 4 pieces in the same direction that we had laid out before. Again, you'll fold right sides together, pin it, and sew it. Now that we've sewn our pieces, we're going to lay them out again. I'm just opening the seams here. You can press your seams open, or I'm doing a finger press here, and they're kind of staying open pretty good. You want to clip any strings off of your fabric, because as you sew, if you don't clip the strings, sometimes they get tangled as you sew, and it's hard to kind of unravel them and cut them out later. So I'm lining this back up so that I can do the next sew. Fold the right sides together, and we want to line up those seams, so I do that first and pin those together, and then I pin it across the rest of the bottom of the bag. This will be the bottom of the bag we're working on now. And again, if you use clips as opposed to pins, that works for some people. I like pins, it's easy, and it helps me keep everything together until I get to the sewing machine. I open it back up just to make sure it's laid out properly. I'm going to do the same thing again with the lining fabric. Right sides together. We're going to pin it, line up those seams. Now on the lining, you're going to need to leave an opening. You can do that at the bottom of the bag, which I would suggest. So at some point you want to leave about a 3-inch opening and not sew it all the way across. You want to make sure you sew the ends, but leave an opening, and then you can sew it at the end. I actually did not do that. I forgot to leave the opening at the bottom, so I ended up leaving my opening as I was sewing around the top of the bag, which you can do also, but it hides it better at the bottom. Now that we've sewn everything together, all seams are lined up, we're going to sew the edges. It gets a little tricky because you kind of have to curve those edges around and play with them a little bit. If it helps, you will clip it after you sew it, but if you need to clip a little bit before, just don't clip in too far. You could. Now I'll pin up the sides of the bag and I'll go around. For me, since I'm using a contrasting fabric, I know I'm pinning a light to a dark all the way around. And I'm going to take some time here because this can be kind of tricky for some. It's not that difficult, but it can be tricky for some, just going up the side seams and pinning. I go ahead and pin all of them at once and then go to the sewing machine, and it kind of gives me an idea of how the bag will look as well. Again, I'm pinning this side, and I believe we end up with 4 sides to pin, and we'll pin all 4 sides and then head right to the machine and get this thing sewn up. And we will do the same with the lining. You see, I've sewn the lining up, and I actually cut out a rectangle and a square, kind of square piece of fabric of the lining, the same material, and I'm going to add pockets to the inside lining. So here I'm just opening up the bag, looking at the stitching, showing you how I stitched up the sides of the bag. Now I will turn it inside out so that I can lay the pockets out and get an idea of their placement on the bag. I want one in the front and one in the back, so I'm going to add those points together. We'll put them together and lay this out, and then you'll see me lay out my pocket design. On each of the pocket squares, I top stitched one side, and then the 3 sides I will stitch to the bag. So I just folded down those sides, ironed them, and I'll stitch 3 seams on the 2 sides and bottom. And I'll do the same with the smaller pocket. You want to make sure you don't place it too high because you need to allow for the seam allowance at the top of your bag. Now the pockets are sewn on. I'm just checking to make sure I can get into them. Good. And some people stitch an extra seam on the larger pocket and make 2 pockets, just stitch a seam down the middle of it. That's an option too. Now, I am also going to look at my external fabric for the bag and see how I want to place it, and I'll tell you why. If I put the peaks together in this direction, as you notice, there are 2 light stripes and a dark stripe in the center, and I have to determine the front of the bag. So I play around with it and I see which I like best. Do I like the 2 light stripes in the dark, or the 2 dark stripes and the light in the center? So if you're using contrasting fabric, you want to make sure you want to determine the front and back of your bag, because you're also going to put a clasp on the bag, so you want to know where the front will be. Once I determine the front, then I know how to place the lining inside and which pockets I want facing the front of in the lining or the back, if that's important to you, or if you put a pocket in, that would be important. And I look at it a couple of times just to make sure that my decision, that I've made a final decision on the two dark sides and the light side in the middle. Now, with right sides together, you want to put the lining, the right side of the lining facing the right side of the external fabric of the bag. So as you can see, my raw edges are facing out for the bag, and if I put my hand inside the bag, I touch the raw edges of the lining because the right sides are facing together. And if you left the 3-hole gap at the bottom of the bag, that's fine, but if not, you're going to pin around the top of the bag. And you want to leave about a 3-inch gap there if you did not leave it at the bottom. We're going to sew all the way around that top edge, but you see I've left the gap there so that I can turn the bag inside out. Now the bag is inside out, and I'm also determining the clasp fabric that I want on this bag. And I realized I actually took the lining back out, which I don't show here, because I need to put the clasp on and then put the lining. That's a magnetic clasp that I got from like a Joann's, I believe I got it from Joann's store. And I like this fabric because it matches the faux leather straps that I will put on the bag. I'm not sure this will be my final decision, but I'm playing around with what fabric I want as a clasp. If it's a thin fabric, I also recommend that you double layer it or layer it with the heavier denim. The back of my clasp will end up being the denim and the front will be the fabric. I put the magnetic clip on and I put cardboard behind it. The instructions on the clip package suggest that so that it does not poke the fabric. Now I am turning my bag inside out, and what I also did before sewing the lining on, I used that fabric that you see there, the purple and blue. I decided to make the strap clasps out of that fabric, along with the faux leather handles that you'll see me put on soon. I'm turning the bag inside out. This takes a minute, but and it looks a little crazy as you're doing it, but I promise you it'll be fine. And you want to make sure that you poke out all corners. Now again, if you left the hole at the bottom, then you turning that bag inside out as well, and your hole will be at the bottom. You want to make sure all corners, all 4 of those peaks, are pushed out, but be careful not to poke a hole through those. I'm just using my fingers. Some people use a tool. Now I'm just pushing the lining fabric back in. Making sure the pockets are lined up properly. And I'm pulling the strap over, and you can see the inside of the strap is the same as the dark fabric. And I'm just making sure that the magnetic clasp works. Now this is ready for a good press. You want to press that lining inside and press the bag outside. Now I've pressed the bag. Everything's lining up. I took 2 straps from the vinyl fabric or the faux leather. I cut them about 21, 22 inches, and I left the ends open, but I sewed close to the edge. I just folded it in half, about 1.5 inches wide, folded it in half, sewed close to the edge, but left the ends open so that I could spread them out and sew them onto the bag. And I put them right over that peak, and I use a clip to hold them on the bag until I'm ready to sew. It's a pretty flexible fabric. I may have been able to use a pin, but the clips work better for me. You're going to put clips on both sides. I like to get everything ready and then I head to the sewing machine. Just helps me to be a little more organized when I get there. I'm going to sew right around that flat part in a horseshoe or a U shape kind of. I'll go to all four corners, or I should say 2 corners, and then straight up the sides. So now I'll head to the sewing machine. I'll be right back. So here we have it. You can kind of see that stitching on the straps. I'm just going to clip off these strings. And this is pretty much your bag, guys. This is easy. I love this bag. I carry one, I'll carry the other. I will probably, even though they're canvas and denim, I'll carry them through the winter. I love this bag. I love the way the strap is just the right length over my shoulder. I really love it. And there you have it. I hope that you are successful. Please share if you make this bag. I look forward to seeing it. It's a great bag. And as you can see in the photos, I have 3 sizes here. I made it in a denim with the large green button. I made a little fun bag for evening, like an evening bag. And we also have the one I just made, the largest size. So thank you again. Please subscribe to my page. Also visit my blog. All the links are below. And thank you for visiting Craft Sew with Gail. T.C. Terry. I'll see you soon.